sharing the screen. So as I was saying, this is a joint presentation, and the first P&T meeting I went to when I came to the University of Arizona quite a while ago focused on how to fill in the blanks of the application. It was probably the most boring workshop that I've ever been to, and we're hoping not to repeat that. So what Andy and I are going to really talk about is how to navigate through promotion and tenure, and try to give you some tricks and some ideas on how to work on your application, things to avoid, and I think that will lead to good success. So one of the important things is your department, and you're going to be working very closely with your department and your chairman, and your department wants you to be successful. I would encourage you to seek out mentors, and mentors can really be helpful in lots of ways over the early stage of your career and help you to get on committees where you can get national recognition, which is critical for later steps in your promotion. They can help you keep on track. And so I came across this cartoon which talks about how your intellectual freedom will evolve. And I thought this was very true. And I think mentors can be very helpful in keeping you on track and keeping your research in focus, and are good sounding boards to bounce ideas off of when you're starting to put together your promotion and tenure package. So when you go to graduate school or before graduate school, you believe that research is whatever you want to do. In graduate school, then it becomes whatever your professor wants you to do. Let's see, as an assistant professor, then it's what the tenure committee wants you to do. And then it's when you get to be a professor, it's what's the grants committee wants you to do. Finally, when you get to be a professor emeritus, I'm going to do whatever research I want to do. And then it's the end, and rest in peace. So it's a great challenge, but it's also very rewarding in what you can accomplish. And what we're going to talk about today is mostly the tenure track and achieving tenure. Here at the University of Arizona, I've been on the promotion and tenure committee for the past 6 years. I was chairman this last year, and I've also run a task force to clarify the clinical tracks that we have that's part of the promotion and tenure pathways that are available to all the clinical faculty. And so on the tenure track faculty, for the tenure track faculty, this is really the trifecta. And what you need is sustained scholarly activities since your appointment. You need teaching and mentoring, and this has to be high quality teaching and mentoring. And then for all faculty, there's significant service that you need to get engaged in. And this service is to your department, to your college, to the university, to the community, and then to one's professional organizations. And that's the way that you can actually get national recognition in a quick way. The other way is to get national recognition when you're on grant review committees, and particularly grant review committees for NIH. So I know this is kind of a busy little slide, but I wanted to go through and just kind of show you the pathway that you're going to start on once you start filling out your tenure dossier. And so we're going to focus over here on the tenure track. And this is for the U of A, and this is how we do it. And then I'm going to turn the program over to Andy and let Andy show some differences about how NAU does this. So probably around between April and June, you need to put together your tenure track dossier, and particularly your CV and the documents that you're expected to fill out. The other thing you need to start thinking about is shown here in kind of step number 2 are the evaluation letters. And these have to be letters that are outside the U of A. These are letters for people that are your rank that you're going for in your promotion or higher, and they can't have been collaborators or have worked with you. They can know you from being on committees and know your reputation from a grant review, but you cannot have worked together previously. And so these letters are, at least the names are put together and given to your chairman. And then your chairman will also invite external evaluators who he will also go out, or she will go out and seek their review of your packet. At the same time, you can ask letters from your collaborators, and I would really recommend this. Or you can ask letters of your students to attest to your teaching and your mentoring style. So once your packet then is put together, this happens at around between July and October. It goes to your departmental P&T committee. This departmental P&T committee will review your dossier, and then they will vote. And that committee vote then, and a letter of support will then be sent to the department chair. The department chair is also going to write a letter. This happens like in September. And then following that, between November and January, the whole packet with all these letters then, and the external letters, the P&T committee letters, and the department chair letters will be sent to the college P&T committee. And for us, it's the College of Medicine Tucson P&T committee. This committee then, probably between January and February, maybe a little earlier, they will review your packet, they will vote, and then they'll give a recommendation to the college dean. The dean then submits his recommendation to the university P&T committee, which then sends all the recommendations to the senior vice president for the health sciences. And then that goes on, and there'll be another letter entered into the packet, and that goes on to the provost. So when the provost gets it, it's probably mid-April or the end of April, and then you will hear about the decision later on in June. So it's quite a long process. There's a lot of steps. And I think what Andy and I'd like to do is really show you how you can highlight your packet so that everything that you've done really stands out and is noticed by people that are reviewing your packet. So I'm going to run the slides for Andy, and I'm going to turn it over to Andy.
Okay, well, thank you. I should clarify, actually, I am an associate professor, not an assistant professor. So I've been through the process myself. Yeah, I think that everything that Dr. Heimark said is true. happens at U of A is certainly slightly different than what happens at NAU, but the steps and the timing of the steps are generally the same. Here at NAU, we run all of our promotion and tenure documents through an online system called the FAR system, and I don't recall what that stands for, but it's a automated system that allows you to input documents and to upload PDFs and things like that. And generally speaking, in the year that you go up for tenure that summer, it's sort of at least my experience, a two-step process in that you'll prepare your application for external review, but that's mainly your CV and some general statements on your research and teaching and service. And those will go to a handful of external evaluators. We'll talk about the external evaluators a little later. But so they will be able to see, that kind of core packet of your CV, your statements and the things that you've prepared, and relevant publications and other things that you choose to include. And they sort of evaluate that the rest of the summer as you are finalizing the packet for internal review. We'll certainly have a chance to talk about this as we go along, but the way I have recommended this in the past is that it's always good to be mindful that even though this is an automated system, everybody who's reviewing this are real people who are busy themselves and who are maybe prone to they're not always as perfectly thorough as you'd want them to be. And so I recommend that people make your CV as comprehensive as you possibly can, but in your statements, the statements are really a good place to make sure that key things that you want to have communicated are clearly communicated. Your teaching, for example, if you want to just have a table that outlines what teaching you did, what classes they were, how many students were there, what type of metrics you received from that, that's a really valuable thing for the people who are looking at that, because it's a super useful information that they would otherwise have to dig for, that you've presented in a concise manner. And it also gives you an opportunity to, provide context for the path that you've taken. If there's, particularly challenging things that you've had to overcome, or particularly valuable accomplishments that you want to make sure the value is understood. That's what the statements are for. That and they are your opportunity to really make your case that you have met the expectations that the college or your department has outlined. All of those will have department or college expectations, and it'll be a document that you can argue pointedly, I meet this case and this case and this case by the products that I'm putting forth. So the steps for us are pretty similar in so far as the very first thing that will happen is that the department will review your application. We call it a faculty service committee here because it's something that evaluates people every year. And at that point, they will see the same documents that the external evaluators saw, but they'll also be able to see the evaluations that the letter writers have provided. And other things like student evaluations, annual evaluations from previous years, and any responses that you may have submitted to those reviews are all documented in the system. And from this point on, everyone can see those things. So from the department will vote. It, it will then go to the department chair. They will write a letter of support, and the department chair will analyze their letter as well as the rest of the body of the documents that are there. And typically the department chair will try to add further context, and maybe in their letter they want to be supportive, but maybe supportive in ways that haven't been touched on already by the FSC committee. From there, it goes to our college P&T committee. College P&T committee, I think for each of the colleges at NAU is there's slight differences, but in general, it will have one person from every unit in the college. Whomever is part of your unit is a non-voting member, and they are there to they abstain primarily from the conversation, except for when they're asked to provide explanations for how things run in the department. And so it isn't as if your department representative is not part of your review completely. They actually do provide a pretty substantial review, or substantial role rather, because they can be someone who can say, in our department, we do things like A, B, and C, and that's why in this person's application, it looks that way. At least here at NAU, some of the college or some of the departments are very, very different from one another. In the college that I'm in, my department and one other are only offer master's degrees. The rest offer PhDs. And so even that tends to, this is the first time that most people on the P&T committee will probably even know who you are, is by seeing your application come through. And so having somebody who can provide some context as what it's even like in your department is really valuable. From there, the letter that they write, they will write a letter. It will go to the dean's office. The dean, kind of over the holiday time, will be reviewing those applications and considering them and writing their own letters. And in the spring, those will go to the provost office, and the provost has the final comment. Yeah, I'll fill in a little more on this as we go, but we can go to the next slide. Yeah, so in general, this is a slide that I think is something that fills the bill at most places of what it means to be on a tenure track. Ideally, your university will want you to be a triple threat, meaning you're good at research, you're accomplished at teaching, you're willing and able to do good service when you're asked to do that. And what it also means is, if you get tenure, is that you will have a guaranteed contract. And so that's something that comes into play as this review is going through, is just we had I've heard previous deans refer to in kind of a somewhat cynical way, but just saying, if I'm going to give you tenure, you're going to have to be a dedicated teacher, because you could stop everything if you so chose, but I'm going to make you teach for the rest of your career here. And so that's not that that's the way that people view this, but the idea is that with that guaranteed contract is the implication that you still are willing and interested in doing all of the things that got you to that point. It's easy to focus on the tenure process as the tenure review itself, meaning you submit your packet and you just wait for all the reviews to come down. And that absolutely is true. But what it's important to remember is that the tenure process is inclusive of reviews that happen before that final review. So many universities will have a third year review or a mid-cycle review that gives people some kind of pointed guidance on where they stand and where they can improve. And it is the sixth year where the decision is made on your promotion to associate professor with tenure. It's something that it's worth bearing in mind that if situations come up that have set you back for whatever reason that might be, you can request that tenure clock be stopped. The great example that we probably have ever had has been COVID. If COVID unequivocally has been disruptive to all of us, but it's been particularly disruptive to all of you insofar as that it's happened right in the midst of you trying to do other things in your tenure window. So, if you don't feel you need that, you don't have to ask. But if you do feel that extra time would be valuable to make sure you've accomplished everything that you want to accomplish before you're reviewed, that is something that is your right, and you can explore that. Generally speaking, I think the metrics by which you're being promoted or being judged up for promotion based on is your reputation nationally among your peers. That's assessed through the letters and through some other documentation if you can provide that. Certainly research is the primary things that people look for are publications and research grants. It's not the only things, but those certainly ones that people will look for. How much teaching you've done, how well you've done it, how responsive you've been, how much you care, that comes through in the package, and how well and how much you are doing for departmental or college level service or university as well. I just added one, and you can move to the next slide. I just had one other thing that is where NAU is slightly differs as, whoops, actually, could we back up one slide? Oh, thanks. We don't necessarily have a third year review. It's more, it's just an annual review where that goes on with particular importance given to the review that you receive immediately before you apply for tenure. That's referred to as your critical year. The other thing that NAU would add to this is we historically have been an undergraduate focused institution for most of our history. So undergraduate and graduate student mentorship is another thing to not lose sight of when you're putting this together, and whether you describe that as part of your research effort or part of your teaching effort is kind of up to you. But I mean, I think it's something that you don't want to forget about. So, yeah, so this is a summary of the promotion dossier for I think this is from U of A, but it's not quite the same at NAU, but generally speaking, it is. Some of these documents, this is really the dossier that the reviewers will see, although not all of these documents are things that the candidate themselves prepared. The data sheet for your application is usually administration, either in the department or in your college. What's another part that's fairly important is a summary of your workload. So that's something that you, most of the time as a faculty member, you may have a little bit of input into, but for the most part, you receive from your assignment from your department. But it's important to make sure that that is in there. I'll just say this as an example, is that, you know, our department guidelines and our college level guidelines for many of the departments at NAU were written at a time when everybody had the same workload. You basically were 50-50 teaching and research with a little bit of service. Over the last 5 years, we have changed fairly substantially insofar as it's fairly common now for individuals to be hired with a workload that isn't 50-50. It could be, you know, heavy on the research side, or it could be heavy on the teaching side, or it could be, you know, a variety of different things. That's really important for your reviewers to have, so they can understand your accomplishments in the context of what your expected workload is. Again, the criteria that you're being judged on are also part of this, and you will also know about them. If you don't already, that's something to just have a quick conversation with your chair, probably of your department, to make sure you have those. But the documents are really, you know, a comprehensive CV that lists, you know, collaborators, lists, you know, all of your publications, presentations, you know, grants. You want to be as comprehensive as possible. Oftentimes, it's really helpful to have previous students that you've overseen, and statements that allow you to elaborate on, you know, what it is that how it is that you approach all of these things, how you go into teaching, what's important, what you feel is important there, how you've changed when you've recognized that changes need to be there. It's your opportunity to really describe the path you've taken, I think, is the best way to explain it. There will be evaluation documents that are either, you know, from peer evaluations of your teaching. Student evaluations are usually included at NAU, and the letters from evaluators and collaborators. NAU doesn't have a tremendous number of graduate interdisciplinary programs, but colleges that do, there's a document associated with that as well. And then, as I said before, the last thing that people will see is prior recommendations from the reviewers as the process has been going on. So yeah, we can move to the next slide. Ron, do you want to talk about this one, or do you want me to?
Oh, I think you can do it.
Okay. So in general, I think that both of our institutions are going to look fairly similarly at the dossier and say determine what the critical pieces really are. As I said, you know, that workload assignment is really a valuable sets the baseline for what it is that people are looking at. The teaching evaluations are really helpful because they are objective and they are from people who themselves are skilled in this. The outside letters of reference are really valuable because they do speak to your national reputation, both as your whatever research you're pursuing, but also these evaluators will be evaluating your teaching and your service as well, and they will be giving some perspective as to what they feel your accomplishments are relative to what they know at their own institution. It is good, and at U of A, they have to be independent of the candidate, and outside of U of A, and not to say that internal letters can't be included, they certainly can, But it's those external letters that are really critical to the review process. At NAU, a lot is the same. We do, I'd say the annual evaluations that the department and the dean's office put in are something that people quite often will look through. Our letters of reference are, I'd say it's similarly most valuable if they're coming from external sources. For us, it's a little, the way it's been described to me is that the most valuable letters that you can have are from faculty who are at peer institutions or comparable programs. And that can often be a little hard to gauge for us here at NAU, just simply because the university has been changing fairly significantly over the last 5 years. But you know, if there are a bunch of universities who are at comparable size as we are with, you know, programs that host the same kind of students that we host, those are the types of institutions that when people are writing letters, they can be really helpful. You know, you could get a letter from somebody at Harvard who's writing you an evaluation, and not to say that that wouldn't be a valuable thing, but they, it's certainly our institution doesn't compare to theirs, and so those letters are just always harder to for reviewers to digest. U of A, I don't think has quite the same issue there insofar as, you know, flagship university. It's the comparator programs are also flagship universities at other states, and so I think that that's maybe a little less nuanced there, but certainly, and you know, we're both around if questions come up, particularly about anything, honestly, but about letters or peer institutions, certainly we can reach out to Ron or I, and we're happy to, you know, keep helping you through this. It is best if they are independent of the candidates, but oftentimes it's in NAU, it's a dean's office that really determines if they're independent or not. And so, like I think it's fairly common to have a handful of letters that you send out, or requests for letters that you send out, and have the dean's office determine after the fact that some people are a little too close to you than you felt they would be, and so they'll might be qualified as not arm's length, in which case it's not that what they have to say isn't valuable, it's just viewed a little differently. It's viewed as less of an objective assessment than those who are arm's length. So yeah, so I think we'll go on to the next slide.
Well, I
Can
see that
ask a,
Ricky has a question.
yeah. I'm struggling a little bit with the peer institutions, not really struggling, but some, and I'd be curious of others' thoughts, but you know, when some of us have very specific areas of research that are really narrow, and you know, you want someone to be able to evaluate that appropriately, and I just can't, of course I'll do some digging, but I can't think of anyone at a peer institution that might be able to do that, of course. But is it better to get someone at a peer institution that might not know my work that well, or someone who knows my work better, like in terms of substantive area, and not at a peer institution? Does that question make sense?
It does. And I think, you know, certainly when you're giving names to your department of people for them to reach out to, I would do a mix of both of those things. And I understand what you're saying. It's a very specific program that maybe it doesn't quite compare to anywhere else. And so that's, I'd say, your department chair and others who are in, you know, other peers, like they may be able to help kind of suss this out a little better too, and to suggest some people. But I think that if you have any kind of people that you can identify that seem like they're trying to do the same type of thing that you're doing, not necessarily research wise, but just in a unique program wise, if you can, they don't necessarily have to be at an authentic peer institution. They could be at you know, an institution that's very different than your own. But if you seem to feel like that they connect to what they're pursuing, the same kind of process as you are, that's actually a reasonable person to suggest. My whole point of mentioning it is just that, you know, in my own time at the P&T committee, I have read a lot of these letters, and once in a while, it's actually not once in a while, it's fairly often, you'll get somebody who has an evaluation from someone who just really doesn't understand what life is like at NAU. And so they will, I don't think I've really ever seen negative letters necessarily, but they will have a level of uncertainty that it makes for kind of a letter that just doesn't have the same kind of, you know, oomph behind it that you'd really want. And so that's my whole point of just, you know, thinking about who to ask is really worth it. So, and that's, but it is complicated because there's a lot of factors that can cause people to be good reviewers or not as good reviewers.
Hey, Andy, can I just make a comment? I agree. I've seen because I was on the P&T committee as well. And I mean, they would say, well, they wouldn't get tenure at my institution, which isn't saying that don't tenure them at your institution, but it's a terrible way for the end of the letter to sound. And so, so I agree. And it is tricky because I'm kind of in the same boat as you are. You know, it's working with data, you know, these specific types of populations and so forth. So it doesn't have to be totally in your area, but you do want to get someone, and they need to be senior. Like for you, definitely someone at an associate level at least. So, and they don't necessarily have to be real familiar with your work because they're going to get all this information and they read through it and all that kind of thing. But you just don't, you know, it is tricky. I mean, I've also seen letters from really good institutions, much, you know, the Stanfords of the world, and they seem to do a better, deeper dive into understanding the NAU climate. And so then they will give positive, but it's a little bit of a, you don't know how they're going to feel. So.
Yeah, I'd say the strongest letters that I read or have read have all been kind of from people who say, you know, I know what it's like to work at that institution doing what this candidate is trying to do. I know what they've done is hard, and I know their accomplishments are significant. And when people say things like that, you can really, I mean, that's a really powerful statement.
Thank you. This is really helpful perspective.
You know, I think the other kind of statement in the letters that I've seen quite a few times here at the U of A is that this candidate or this applicant would be promoted at my institution. And that usually comes from fairly senior letter writers that really know how to write letters and to evaluate candidates.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. I agree with that completely.
Any other questions?
I have a
Alina?
question.
Yeah.
I've also heard that the letters of reference can't come from anyone that you published with previously. Is there any strategy that I can start thinking about now in regards to that? Like how, I don't know, just thinking about, do I avoid publishing with that person but still be friendly, or like, are there any good strategies? No. Okay. I'm just wondering.
You know, I think that one good thing to add to your packet are letters from collaborators. So people that you know and people you worked with, they can attest to your collaborative nature, your creativity, and the potential for your success. And those are really good letters to also include in your packet. They're not kind of part of those core external letters, but you can easily include 3 or 4 collaborative letters.
Yeah, I would also say that the longer the arm, you might say, the more distant they are from you. And if they then write a pretty strong letter of recommendation as an external evaluator, that's pretty golden compared to someone that, you know, oh, I went to graduate school with this person, but I didn't publish with them. That's pretty soft, because it really has that a little bit of a conflict of interest, or that they're going to be positive. And really, for the most part, they really are trying to see, you know, it's like a peer review type of thing, right? Whether that person really thinks you have met the mark in those different areas. So, but there's tons of faculty, so I'm sure there's got to be a couple that could write a pretty good letter. You know, sometimes it seems daunting to find those folks, but I would say, you know, they're probably out there.
Any other comments? So maybe we'll move on.
Sure. Yeah, this is just, you know, I think just a slide that I put in here just to emphasize that in that review process, it's important to remember that this is a constructive process, and that the people that are reviewing this, they do want you to succeed, and they're not trying to pick on you to, you know, say mean things and get you upset, even though sometimes it's never always easy to hear things that you're being critiqued on. But I just think it's great advice, and it was advice that was given to me as well, that, you know, just as simple as just listening to what the feedback is in these reviews and trying to take that to heart. I mean, just do the best that you can to try to implement the changes that people are suggesting, if they're suggesting changes. If you feel that the review had really missed something important that you have done, then I think that it's important to make sure that you respond. But, you know, it's in my own experience, you know, I did go to others with my own teaching and just saying, you know, I'm having problems doing this, that, or this other thing. What are your opinions of things that I could do to change that? And I think that that's something that, you know, your peers certainly see that as you being an authentic, you're really caring about your job. And even if the changes that you're trying to make don't fix the issues entirely, the fact that you're making an honest effort, it really does go a long way. And so again, like, your peers are really, they are here to help you. That said, you know, in the evaluation process, responding to the evaluation, if you don't feel it is fair or comprehensive, it's your right. And I think you should respond if you feel that any review that you get is not, I wouldn't say not fair, but that it's not, you know, accurately accounting for everything that you've done. In the tenure process, that's particularly important, because your responses to reviews that your department has given you, or your dean, or whomever, are recorded, and they're part of the evaluation going forward from that. And so there have been instances where it's been important for faculty to make sure that their thoughts are represented regarding the reviews that they've seen. So you definitely want to take the feedback to heart and do your best to to accommodate that, but at the same time, you want to respectfully describe backwards when you feel like I talked about that in my statement and somehow it was missed. I mean, so it's, you don't want to be, write a grumpy letter by any means, but certainly you want to make sure that people know where you stand. So.
Ricky has a question.
Sorry, I have lots of questions. This is
Good.
really helping demystify this a little bit for me, at least. Can you, so you say we can respond to like steps in the tenure evaluation. Can you speak to what kind of information we'll get at each step? Like we'll know when it's complete. Will we know if they gave us the thumbs up, the thumbs, like how much information do we get at each step of the process?
In the at least at NAU, the FAR system will email you when each step is completed, and it'll say, your FSC letter has been finished, and you can go in and you can read it. And usually those letters have a blanket statement at the end saying that you have X amount of days to submit a response, and it'll do that every step of the way. So it's if you have any reason to think that you're not getting those, I would just make sure to reach out to somebody in the dean's office. I could give you the person in Stephan's name, but I'm not sure who would it be in your college. But it shouldn't be something that gets lost in the shuffle. It should be emailed to you. So.
Can I make another comment? Just the yearly, so leading up to tenure. And this is just because I have a very close friend in a different department who's getting almost rubber stamped annual reviews. So there's really not very much feedback in those. And so he's very concerned that when he goes up for tenure, it seems like he's doing fine, but he really hasn't gotten much feedback from his department. And I say this because I am the FSC chair for our department, and we spend a lot of time on the whole yearly evaluation. So what I'm saying is, if you feel like you're not getting substantive feedback from your department, you should ask for it. You should say, I really would like a more in-depth review, because this is the time to say, right the wrong, right? If you're going off on a path that maybe isn't where you should be, this is the time to, improve that. But if you're not given any type of constructive criticism with that, then it, all of a sudden tenure hits and you put in your application, you're like, well, I wish someone would have told me that 2 years ago. So just read those carefully and then do address them, like Andy said, because that also shows the university that you're taking all this criticism to heart and you're trying to be, a better professor type.
So this slide is just talking about scholarship, and what scholarship you really want to consider to be like inclusive scholarship that you're writing about. As you said before, the publications and the grants and the grant applications that you put forth are definitely the big part of this, but you want to make sure that you also describe anything else that you're doing that you feel is scholarship or research. And I would say, and so there's just go through the list here, patents, any tech transfer opportunities or interactions you've had, community partner, foundation funded research, course publications and presentations, community-based research or community responsive research, research or inquiry that generates new knowledge to address practical problems, and fine performing and applied arts, and expert interviews in the media. The reason that, so it's good to include all this stuff just because it's totally valid to include, but it's also, the one thing that I would say part and parcel to this is that oftentimes things that aren't publications, grants, and presentations are, you never know if particularly on the P&T committee, if your other evaluators can appreciate how important and how impactful they are. And so you may want to spend a little time in your statement outlining that they're impactful and explaining why. And this is the kind of thing that if your departmental representative can have that knowledge as well, they can be a second point of confirming that, you know, this is scholarship that means a lot, and it's just outside of what is traditional insofar as publications and grants are the main thing that 9 out of 10 people are probably focused on when you say scholarship. In the P&T committee that I've been a part of, you know, just the very first bullet point, patents and invention disclosures, a lot of people don't know what those are, or what goes into it, or that the fact that it is, you know, hard and that it takes a lot of time and effort, and that it's a significant accomplishment. So anything that you're pursuing, you want to make sure you present that the importance and the impact that each effort has.
And I would second that. Same for the U of A.
The other thing about scholarship, and this is, you know, maybe less, a bit more nuanced, but it's always nice when you're doing collaborative work, if you somewhere in your packet can explain what your role in the collaboration was. And particularly if you are a member of a group of people that has gotten a grant, what portion of the money is going to you as opposed to going to the institution is a valuable perspective. You know, certainly not to devalue this at all, but like mentorship, you know, it's really good to communicate what kind of students you've worked with, and really good if you could communicate what type of outcomes that they have themselves encountered. Like, so if they've gotten a publication, that's great. Or even if, you know, it's not, you don't necessarily need to get all your students on publications, but, you know, if you've got a handful of undergrads who managed to go put a presentation at a conference somewhere, that's a really valuable thing for those people. And it's also, it shows pointedly that you care about your role as an educator. And so that comes through, it comes through, and you don't want to forget about it.
Okay, I'll go on with the slides. And I wanted to emphasize what Andy said and really talk a little bit more about the annual review. And, you know, I think I find the annual review, to be honest, a pain in the ass. But I think it gives me an opportunity to really evaluate my goals and activities for what are their impact? Where am I spending my time? And how is that, you know, providing something new in terms of research or working and mentoring or whatever it happens to be. So I think it's important to take and use your annual review, and actually you should be empowered to talk to your departmental head and really discuss about what you have done. You know, you can ask questions from your department head about, does productivity correspond with the workload assignment you've been given? Another question would be, are there areas in which you need to be more productive? What types of publications, journals, conferences, presentations should I be pursuing? And I can say that in our P&T committee, usually the reviewer of your packets, or the reviewers, they will go to Google Scholar and see what kind of H-index that your publications have generated to see what is the impact of your publications. The same is true then looking at service opportunities, which are the most important and will work with your interests. And then to ask, what else should I be doing for the promotion, and talk through then your plan for the coming next year, and really use your chairman as kind of like a sounding board to keep him engaged and supportive of your goals and future. So even at the U of A, teaching is really important, and getting good teaching evaluations is very important to put into your packet. And this is not only the numerical scores that the students are giving you in the review of your lectures and the classes that you've taught, but also in those amongst those numerical scores, there's lots of student comments. And I think those student comments are even more powerful, and will really support, your application and then your impact. We have peer faculty who observe our lectures, and they do an evaluation. There's self-reflection, and then there's learning outcomes. Where are these students going? How are they progressing? So I think that this is really a very important part of the packet. And the one thing that I haven't listed here, it's good when you write up in your statement about teaching, is really to describe your teaching philosophy, and how does your teaching philosophy relate to the evaluations that you've gotten from teaching and mentoring. So service is kind of the last area that I want to talk a little bit about, because it's important, particularly when you're a young faculty, to find the right types of service to take advantage of. So here are a list of some examples. For example, community outreach within your role as an expert in your field. Speaker at community events is very powerful and good to add to your narrative on your goals and teaching and service. Serving on advisory boards for local groups is important. Expert testimony, as you've heard before, is really a good area. And I'm thinking about Diane Stearns and how her testimony related to uranium in Arizona and around the Grand Canyon. Service in terms of learning of outside credit-bearing courses. Departmental committees, of course, university committees. How much time have you spent on those committees? Professional organizations. Grant reviewers are very important, particularly if you're a reviewer for NIH or for the DoD, the Department of Defense. And then as a journal article reviewer or a journal editor. Those are all very significant types that rate very well in your packet. Questions that you should ask yourself on when you're trying to select what service should you participate in is, for example, is it aligned with your research? Will it help further your teaching? Are there potential high impact implications for the type of service you're going to do? What is the level of prestige? How important is this to your own fulfillment? Each and every one of us have goals in the back of our mind that we want to accomplish and impact the university community or our departmental community. How important is this activity to giving back to others like me? Does it fill a social justice need? Another thing that's critical is what is the timeline and how long will the time commitment be? And how much preparation will be needed for the committee meetings? So all of those should factor in to the types of service that you're going to engage in. And when I was up at the University of Washington as a young faculty member on the research track, I said yes to everything. And eventually the students that were in my lab gave me a button and they made me wear this button. And this button said, "No way." So that helped me to define better, where I should be spending my time. So this is, again, a little bit more about the external reviewers that must be independent. At above the rank, the candidate is reviewed for promotion. These are all criteria from the U of A guidelines. Let's see, only the head or the committee chair should contact the outside reviewers. No more than half can come from the candidates list. You have to use the required template for requesting the letters, and the department is required to include all solicited letters. And rarely, there are some people who are requested to write letters that write a bad letter. They'll say that I don't think this person should be promoted at this level, but that may not be justified, but it has to be included. So, I think that you would hear about that from your chair and the committee and be able to rebut that letter. I know that the committee, the review committee in the college, they go through all the letters very thoroughly and look at the nuances of what the letter writer is saying and really balance out how that fits with the rest of the package. The reviewers also submit a brief bio, and these are very brief, they're not CVs, and usually they're considered experts at peer institutions. So that's a criteria that the committee here is looking for, and the types of letter writers that you need to think about. So the last thing I want to say is, things come up in life, and it's really important to think about if you need to take a clock delay in the review time for your promotion and tenure. And this can either be birth or adoption of a new child. There can be personal reasons, particularly in family or partner health care. And that's particularly important during this past time of COVID. In fact, our PNT committee, and maybe this is not PNT committee, but our PNT application actually has a COVID section and a COVID statement in it. And that could be true at NAU. I just don't know. There could be adverse professional circumstances, or, you could be invited to be on Joe Biden's moonshot committee and to help serve in selection of those research grants, which can be very time consuming. I know that, there was a group of friends I had in Houston, and Houston had one of these summer rainstorms where everything flooded around Baylor, and it flooded their animal facilities, which happened to be in the basement of the building, killed all their animals in the vivarium, and set a lot of the researchers back quite a long time. So think about this, it's no stigma against it, and I think it can be warranted. So I think what Andy and I wanted to do is just to open up the rest of the time for the questions and feedback about what we presented. You know, for all of you that are getting ready, it's been a long, arduous climb, such as on a mountain like Mount Rainier shown here, my favorite mountain. And you're getting close to the home stretch. And, you know, if you've ever climbed a mountain, you know what it feels like to reach the top. And that's the way you're going to feel when you're done with your PNT packet. If you don't have any questions, we'll come up with some questions. And I have some questions for Andy.
Oh, go ahead, Naomi. Sorry, I didn't raise my hand.
Oh. I still have no idea how to find sister institutions. Like you guys mentioned it and people have said it, but I'm like, I really have no idea how to go out and compare NAU and what I do to other institutions. And so I don't know if maybe that's something I should sit down with Andy and Janny and get a list with, or.
You know, I think in our faculty handbook, there's a list of peer institutions, and that might be true in your faculty handbook.
Yeah, so the short answer is that there are peer institutions that have been defined as peer institutions of NAU. That I think just got refreshed last year, but they also miss a decent amount of them that I think are fairly comparable to us. And so in short, I can give you the list of institutions that people or that the university considers to be peer institutions, but there are a whole bunch of other ones that aren't on that list that are pretty comparable to what we do. And so it's a little of both, I guess, is the answer.
Okay, yeah, because I only see the faculty handbook from 2018, I think. So if there's a newer one, I might not have it.
That's sometimes there may or may not be. It's hard to say.
Oh, okay. Okay, that will really help because that's where I feel like I'm kind of stuck right now.
I'll make a note to send it to you.
So Ricky, you had a question?
Yeah, about external reviewers. Ron put up a really helpful slide, but it said that only the chair should contact them.
Yes.
Can we email someone ahead of time and say, hey, we're thinking
No.
about adding you to a list? Okay, that's really helpful.
Verboten.
No, that kind of kills the whole arm's length
Yeah.
type thing, because then it could be perceived that you're stirring the pot a little bit. And in the introduction of those letters, usually the person says, you know, this is my background and maybe I met this person at a conference, but like sometimes it comes across, you know, I went to grad school with this person, or they contacted me and asked me to write this letter. That's not how that thing should come across. So
yeah.
You would probably though would want to maybe make your list and talk to Julie Baldwin or, you know, someone, and just so that they can say, yeah, this looks like a good list, or add a couple names, or this person, take this person off, or whatever. So.
And likewise, oftentimes your department leadership or people like Julie will know of other people who are, you know, good and like who know what we're doing or what you're trying to do, and who are appreciative
And are good letter writers.
and are good letter writers.
My reactions aren't working, so I just have to piggyback off of that. So I gave a talk. I was invited to give a talk for UW, who is not a sister institution, and one of the faculties there said they would be willing to write a letter, but I haven't interacted with them outside of that, and I haven't published or anything. Is that still considered arm's length?
Yeah, I think you can do that.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say that that's, I mean, you met this person. It's hard in most all of our fields. We're in such sort of small areas that you're gonna probably run into these people at conferences and stuff. But Just as long as you don't really have a relationship. And then if someone offers to, then you just give that name to your chair and, you know, see how that goes. It's kind of a nice sort of inside outside type thing.
Usually the letters will say, they'll start out their letters and say that, you know, I met Naomi at this conference where she gave a talk. I don't know her personally. We've never worked or collaborated together. And I think she should be promoted. I had a question for Andy, and that is, do you have faculty that are appointed in 2 different departments? And
We do.
who, you know, who, how are they reviewed?
It usually, and Janie, I think maybe you could catch me on this if I don't have it right, but I think it's typically that we will have there'll be an appointment in one department is just a slightly different percentage than the other. So it'll be 55-45 or something like that. And whichever department is their home department by virtue of that is where their reviews all go through. But I think that they still will engage the partner department through that. I think it is just they're treated more as, you know, run through a single department, with the other one just being kind of auxiliary.
I have a follow-up to that. So is that also the case if you have an appointment in a GIDP?
There are letters from the GIDP head that go into your packet, and there is a section on collaborative. I can't remember exactly how it's phrased, but it's for the GIDPs.
Okay.
And you actually probably will end up writing a statement about, you know, what you have done in the GIDP.
I have a similar question. So I'm in a research center, and you know, like NACP, and so I think Andy and Jenny might be really good to answer this. Who don't, you know, they're not reviewing tenure packets, but what kind of you know, what kind of contribution to, say, like a Julie Baldwin have? Is it just a letter? Is it again part of just my statement? This, because again, I'm not being reviewed by the center, I'm being reviewed by the department, but most of my work is in the center. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think letters that she would put in would be kind of that supportive, collaborative kind of stuff, but it wouldn't be a review necessarily, although she could write the letter and provide what her review would be. I think that's kind of, you know, it's an interesting question, because it's, I don't know how often that's really come up in the area that I'm in. But I think that, yeah, you're right. I mean, it's the department that is doing the review, but certainly they wouldn't not take the input from her, and certainly, you know, that I think you could maybe outline in your statements that the primary reporting has been to your center director, with you know, a secondary affiliation with the department, and so that would provide a vehicle to give that letter some substance in the eyes of the people who are reviewing it from that point on.
So the other thing, Ricky, that we found with NACP is that sometimes, particularly internally, people think that the grant funding that a person's getting through the center is almost a handout, like they didn't really compete for that. And so I think it would be helpful if Julie could explain the mechanism, and that your proposal is reviewed on the NIH or whatever level, and that, you got it scored and it actually, plays into that larger grant that gets funding. But that these things are really reviewed individually as research grants, because I know in our department, people really did think that, like, I'm just giving out money to people that I want to. And, it really was frustrating to say that, no, they're still going through peer review. So I think that's a role she could play, because, and it's a little bit more on the inside, but you've got to convince, right, the FSC, your chair, the dean's office, that, you have established your own research program by getting funding, and whether it be through the center or on your own, or the combination, but just knowing that it's not just a handout. That's, I think, kind of an important thing, because it made me super frustrated when I was like, these people have to write proposals that get peer reviewed on the NIH level, so it's not just giving out money. So Selena, you have a question?
Yeah, it was triggered by something that you just mentioned. I know that at other institutions, I've had, I don't know, like urban legends that people have been told in their like 3rd and 5th year reviews that they, like, it seems like they have been collaborating with only certain people, so so it's sort of impeding their independence. Can you kind of give us a rule of thumb around that, around how much do we collaborate with somebody and branching off, and so we don't kind of encounter that feedback?
Yeah, we see that here at NAU, just because we have, in one particular instance, a center where I'd say, just by virtue of the work that this center does, most of the papers have big author lists where everybody's all part of the author list, and the grants also kind of fall to that direction. I don't think that that's something that I've ever seen be a severe enough knock that it's damaging to anybody. But I think if you can point to examples where, you are, fleshing out your own work that is separate from that mission that you also are dedicated towards, I think that's where you just get a gold star for that. I think you're absolutely right that those kind of conversations happen, but I think that everybody who says them, it's really ticky-tack kind of thing to say. It's not going to be something that undermines an application. I can't imagine it would. So,
And I think in your candidate statement, you can really emphasize your role and how you have used your collaborators to accomplish these goals that have had a significant impact. That's the way that I would handle that.
yeah, no, I agree.
I had one, go ahead.
Well, I would just add that it looks worse if your collaborator is your postdoc or your graduate advisor, and you just keep, so then it looks like you really aren't building your own program. But if your collaborators are new folks, either at U of A, say, or at a different institution, you really, it's building your program. So I think that the main thing, and they say the same thing with pubs. Of course, early on, your pubs are probably going to be from your postdoc and your grad program. But as you move further, they want to see them from your institution, from your research program. So I think that's the only thing to be careful of is, because it looks like you're just on the coach strings of your research or your postdoc advisor. So,
yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, that's for sure.
Naomi has a question. She's got her hand.
Yes, I got my hand. I don't know what happened to it, but anyway. So Janny sent me the guidelines, which I did ask Brandon just in case these aren't the most updated, but I was looking through it and it says publications in which the faculty member is the senior or lead author. So what does that mean specifically? Because I make all my students the first author. So
You should be the last.
Corresponding, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
You're the senior author. That means that, you're the leader.
Okay, so senior lead, I mean,
funding and
last author.
ideas. Yes, you
Right,
take
first or
full
last.
responsibility.
Okay, all right, just making sure.
And other pubs are good if you were a contributor, but you definitely, you know, as the reviewers look at them, they want to see where are you in the list.
Yeah,
If you're constantly third or fourth in a list of 6, that doesn't, you know, because it really talks about contribution, right? So those are fine. I mean, pubs are always good, right? But you want to have some where you have, and at NAU, and I'm assuming at U of A too, they want to see student first authors, because that means you're doing your job in
Sure.
terms of training. But you know, then you typically would be that last author, and like Andy said, you'd be the corresponding author. So
On that
yeah.
note, I have a question, but I want to follow up on that. So like I'm an epidemiologist, and a lot of the time I do
Yeah.
the analysis piece. And so I actually indicate in my list, and first author is easy, last author I'll indicate student advised, but also like analysis. So sometimes I'm the second author, sometimes I'm like third, fourth, it depends on like what happens, but I indicate like I did the analysis, I did more work on this paper than I would have somewhere else. So I
I think that
I'm
in
not
your
an expert.
candidate statement, you could handle that.
Yeah.
And your collaborators really appreciate all your efforts.
Oh, Jani, well, thank you.
Yeah.
I actually had a question about, you were talking about postdoc mentors and stuff. I did my postdoc here at NAU, and I still collaborate with my mentors. I still once in a while will collaborate with mentors from my graduate program, but that's in a very different capacity now. But is that something I have to explain away? I mean, I feel like I've grown and expanded, but I don't know if that's something I should probably mention.
I don't think that's a bad thing. I mean, I think it just is, again, like the statement that you're putting there to just, I mean, you could just explain it just like that. Then, I mean,
Yeah.
you did your postdoc here and you still do work with a lot of the same people, but you're taking your own program in a unique direction as well as, you know, the supportive stuff that you do for all the others.
And highlight your impact and contribution to that program or to those publications.
Thanks, Jenny, for always roping me in. You might get me tenure.
Yeah. Any other questions, comments?
Oh, I'm sure I'll have plenty more questions as I start to put it together.
You have our emails, so.
Yeah, but and I guess in reality and timing, like how long should we expect to, or how much time should we expect? Like, should I be starting right now if I'm going to put it in at the end of the school year? I don't even know my exact date.
I would start planning now. I don't know that you have to start filling out the documents, but I would get, you know, things in order.
For sure, update your CV, which you probably have, but like, you know, you have a bunch of recent presentations, student presentations, you know, and all that, because sometimes you forget and then you're like, oh, dang, I forgot to add this. So if you can get that, because then you can take your CV and chunk it out and then do the narratives with that. I guess the other thing I was going to mention while Ron and Andy were going through their PowerPoints is make it super easy for your reviewers. Super easy. Tables are really, really good. You know, that type of thing, because if there's just this really dense narrative, they're going to miss stuff. And then you are going to get the whole, he didn't do this. And you're like, I did, it was in there. But if it's really dense, you know, these folks are reviewing quite a few of these in you know, potentially. So just make it crystal clear to the reviewers, so that they don't have to go searching around. Well, how much did you contribute? What was the size of this grant? Where did it come from? How many years? You know, and that can just be, you know, nice table type of thing. Same thing with the teaching. You know, this was the course, this is the enrollment, this was my evaluation, and that type of thing. But just make it super clear, because you know, having reviewed these things, you start getting mad at the person, and you don't want the reviewer to be mad at you, right? Because you're just like, I don't know what you're saying here. That's something I would suggest.
And I think, so I absolutely agree. But I think you should feel free to, you know, loop your department peers in to just help take a look at this before it goes out. Just for an eye for those sorts of things is like, are these things that I know you've done that are important, are they easy to find? And do they stand out for the importance that I know they already have? And yeah, you don't feel like you're in a vacuum with that. You're definitely not. And certainly you could even ask people for just, can I have a copy of what you wrote to see if I can, you know, use that as a template to put something together on this end.
So are the reviewers or others given this guidelines so they know what the
Yes,
department's expectations are?
yes.
Yeah, including if the chair is doing their job correctly, they should be giving them as well to the external reviewers.
Yep.
Because that's the criterion, right? So.
So I have a request, and this is from Kelly, that in the chat, she asked if you could take 5 minutes to provide evaluation and feedback for today's session, and there's a link that you can click on. Please do that. It'll make Kelly happy.
I also just sent all the ESIs that are here an email as well. So you have the joy of an email from me as well, if you're an ESI. Thanks, Ron. I appreciate that.
I'm looking out for you. Any other questions or comments?
Just thank you for having this. It helps demystify things.
Yeah, even, you know, last week I got an email from one of our ESIs, and there were 2 urban myths in this email. And I thought, you know, back when I started at the University of Arizona, there were all these urban myths going around, and some of them are still going around. So that's partially why I wanted to host this, and, you know, to show people what we've learned and really some of the ways to navigate this P&T packet. So important.
Ron, I have another question. I'm sorry, everyone, that I have another question. So
No,
my department, we're in a phase of rebuilding, let's say, and I'm just thinking, how can I so my chair, for example, is a clinician who doesn't research. So how can I help her to help me, right, without being, you know, just to be viewed as helpful and maybe not like pushy or annoying? Like how can I help them help me get tenure?
Well, I think that, you know, you really want to talk with your chair about your annual review. You know, it's coming up this January where you have to submit your yearly review.
Mhm.
And really get a dialogue going so they understand what you do and what kinds of impact, you know, that you can have here and then with your publications outside the university.
Okay.
Education. I think if you can educate your chair, you know, my chairs have until recently all been clinicians, and it has been a real challenge. And maybe we can talk more about this.
Yes, I did. Yes, I was gonna. That would be great.
Okay? Any other questions for Andy and I? Anything you want to say, Andy?
No, other than just, I mean, we're certainly still around if other questions come up, but please don't hesitate to reach out. Happy to help.
Well, I think then we can sign off. Finish up the last few things we have to do before we get dinner.
Sounds good.
Take
Thank
care,
you.
everybody.
Thank you. No shoveling snow.
Glad to help.